is saying, not for me. They're telling their leaders not to repeat what's happened to the previous generations, that they will not stand idly by and watch development swoop by their communities and be left in the trail of dust and misery with no economic opportunity for them. The elders, and I listened to Margaret at a conference call that we had just yesterday. The elders are very clear in their direction that they're trying to give the leadership. They're saying, listen, what's happened up to now hasn't worked. And we need to, as ourselves, as a nation, get people to understand first that we never relinquish title on the land, and that we need to do what needs to be done to protect our interest. And if Ontario is not going to protect our interest insofar as what they do in Bill 191, well then we're going to have to do what we're going to have to do to protect that interest. And that was clear today in the press conference with representatives from Mushkegowuk Tribal Council and Shibanawal. I got it right. I always want to say the French word because I'm Française, you know. In regards to where things go from here. So I say to the government, you've missed a golden opportunity. First Nations have said you could, that your First Nations have told you, the Chambers of Commerce have told you, the communities in Northern Ontario have told you, and the citizens have told you, there is a way to move forward that would allow us to achieve all our goals, and that is to make sure that First Nations are made whole and they can enjoy the benefits of the economic activity that will happen on their land, that they have a say about how the development's going to happen, and that we protect the environment for the years to come. The only ones who don't want to do this, it would appear, are the government by way of this legislation. So let me just get into the bill quickly, because I only got about 10 minutes. The government has been saying through all of this that, first of all, they've consulted. I just want to make clear there really has not been any consultation. I say to the minister, with all respect, yes, you did go to 8 communities, and that is appreciated. Anytime a minister of the Crown or a member of this House goes into the communities, it is greatly appreciated on the part of the communities. But don't think that's consultation. Consultation is quite something else. But the government time allocated this bill and then said to us in the opposition, you have a day or two in order to decide which 4 communities we're going to go to in the far north in order to consult. But who am I to decide as a member of the legislature which communities we're going to go to? They're not my 49 NAN communities. We should have allowed NAN to make that decision. I think what they would have come back and said is, well, 4 days isn't enough. But then to make matters worse, the government says you have a week, or no, you have 2 weeks in order to organize these hearings, and there wasn't enough time, so the hearings never took place. So the government says they've consulted, hardly the case. Next, the government says, and I read this in the Toronto Star with great interest on the weekend, and they've said this time and time again through the questions that were answered by the Premier and by the Minister and the Parliamentary Assistant on this issue. And they say, well, you know what, we've amended the legislation. If you look at Bill 191 as printed, we made all these amendments to make it better. So let's really look at what you've done. Bill 191, as it stands, under Section 11, says the following, that if you have a community that has no land use plan, there will be no development. So understand what we're saying in this bill, that if a community decides they're not going to participate in the land use plan, and the First Nations have told you by majority they won't, there will be no development allowed in your territory. So already we've got a problem. And that is, it's going to create great uncertainty for the mining and other sectors who are trying to do work in the far north, because communities are going to be put in the position of saying no because they're not happy with what you've given them under Bill 191. And so money is going to fly from Ontario to other jurisdictions when it comes to investment for exploration and others. And who loses? First Nations lose, and this province loses as a result. But here's the thing, that let's say in the end that the community decides it's not going to participate in the land use plan, and the government decides, you know what, this mine in the Ring of Fire is really important, and we got to make it go. Under subsection 4 of Section 11, the government can do an exemption order that would in fact supersede the refusal of the community to not do the land use planning process, and order that the project be allowed to go forward. So what protection does the First Nation really have? You're saying on the one hand, you can't have development unless you have a land use plan, and I guess that's a way of trying to force them into the land use planning process. It's a bit of a threat. If you want some money to do land use planning, and you want development in your community, you got to do a land use plan. But the government reserves the right under subsection 4 of section 11 to be able to exempt the order in order to be able to allow the development to go forward. So let's say a community decides they're going to go forward, and that works out in section 10, 11, and 12. What we have is a rigged game. First of all, who's going to sit on the committee, this joint committee that we talked to on the part of the First Nation, can be refused by the minister in this section of the Act. The minister can say, well, Moose Cree, you want so-and-so to be on this particular land use planning process. We don't like him or her. Nope, they're not on for you. Minister reserves the right. And let's say that we do get a joint committee done and everybody agrees and we go forward. The values that are given as far as the terms of reference of what will be in the land use plan, it's the minister has the final say about what will be accepted in the terms of reference. Yes, the communities have a say. I accept that. I understand. I've read the Act. The community has a real say about what's going to be the term of reference. But the minister at the end of the day has got to sign off because she too has the equal power to the community. And so you have a rigged process right from the start. The premier of the province or the minister can say, I can tell you who I will accept yes or no on the joint committee, and then once the terms of reference are drawn, refuse or accept what the terms of reference will be. So it's a rigged process. And that's why the First Nations don't want to get into, which brings me to my point of the comments by the Minister of the Environment when he was heckling comments, I think, to the speech, I think, of one of the members in the opposition, I forget which one. And he said, well, that's how we've done things for 50 years in municipalities. Well, my God, he finally admitted what the minister wouldn't admit, which is the province controls the process. Because, yes, you're right. In a land use planning process under the Municipal Act, the province controls the process. And what the Minister of Environment finally admitted is what the minister has been trying to deny for this whole time, which is the province will control the process of land use planning when it comes to First Nations territories. Well, let me tell you, a municipality and...
Point of order, the Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not exactly sure whether the member is referring to me, but I would ask him to withdraw that.
No. I've been available. It's fine. I'll settle this right now. That's not a point of order. The Minister for Timmins-James Bay.
I want to correct the record. It was the minister, the former Minister of the Environment, who's now the Minister of Municipal Affairs. I'm sorry. I assumed I got his old title wrong. It was the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Mr. Garrettson, the members from Kingston and the Islands, who made that comment. So my point is, he admitted that in fact the minister holds the deck of cards and is able to decide what constitutes a land use plan and how a land use plan will work. My point is this: if you're trying to say that a land use plan on the far north in Nan Territory is the same kettle of fish as a plan in a municipality, well then there is our problem. There lies the problem. You don't understand the difference. And I think that was a huge admission in the heckling because it said where the government's at. It tells me either A, the minister doesn't want to tell us what it is and tries to tell us something that it's not, or they perfectly well understand and at the end, or they don't understand at all and should go back to the drawing board. So I say the other thing, and I touched on it very quickly in the debate, is that the money that's being put forward in order to develop the land use plans will never have the amount of money. Now let me get to the real, I've got 3 minutes, and this is the kicker. So let's say a community decides they want a land use plan, and so they draft it under section, I believe section 12, under section 12 I believe it is, and all of a sudden they now have a land use plan that's in place. So let's say that the community in drafting that land use plan says, I want to protect this particular part of my territory for future generations.